This is SLP by day,
author by night,
with Tali Kellerstein and
Becca Eisenberg,
bringing the SLP writing community
together.
Hi, I'm Tali Kellerstein, pediatric speech-language pathologist and founder of the Speak Boutique. I'm so excited to be co-hosting this podcast, SLP by Day, Author by Night, with my brilliant friend Becca Eisenberg, as we celebrate the stories and voices of SLPs who are changing the game through creativity and connection. You can learn more about my work at thespeakboutique.com. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. We read all your comments and would love to have your feedback. If you are an SLP author, please join our Facebook group, SLP by Day, Author by Night. Hi, everyone. Welcome to SLP by Day, Author by Night. I am so excited. We are so excited today to have Chris Bugaj and Beth Poss with us. We all go far back, and it's really, really exciting for me personally. This very full circle moment because the first podcast I was on was Becca's podcast previous to this one, and Chris's podcast, and Beth, I think, very shortly after I was on the Lesson Picks podcast. So it just feels like very full circle here. And we'll let our amazing guests give their backgrounds today. Chris, why don't you go ahead? We're so happy to have you here.
Yeah,
sure,
I just want to say I'm very big fans of both Chris and Beth, so I'm very excited too.
Well, thanks for having us. Really appreciate being here. So yeah, my name is Chris Bugaj. I am the assistive technology specialist for Loudoun County Public Schools, which is up in the Northern Virginia area. Speech therapy background, but about 3 years into my career in the early 2000s, they asked me to be one of the founding members of our assistive technology team. So now I'm more of a assistive technology, inclusive design with a speech background to keep up with all my C's and everything like that. And then, yeah, I've had the great fortune to write a couple books. Solo books were, well, the first book was not solo. It was with Sally Norton-Dar, another speech therapist, called The Practical and Fun Guide to Assistive Technology in Public Schools. And then the solo versions of that, or solo after that, was the New Assistive Tech, Make Learning Awesome for All, first edition. And then they asked me to make a second edition, which is the most recent solo book. And then I've got to write a couple chapters for other things. And then Beth and I collaborated with a team called Inclusive Learning 365, which I'll let Beth talk about.
So, okay, sounds great. Awesome. So, Chris and I go way back, like 2000, I want to say like 2007, 2008, somewhere's in there, 2006, somewhere's in there. So gosh, probably close to 20 years now, which is wild considering that Chris is like 25 years old. And
Clearly.
Clearly. But I'm a little bit older than that. And so like my roots back as a speech language pathologist, I worked for over 30 years for Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland. So it's a large suburban school district. I was a school-based SLP. I spent 10 years on our assistive technology team. I then spent another about 10 years doing working central office and working as a central office administrator. So I supervised for our early childhood programs. And then I was an assistant principal in a general education elementary school. So I have done, in my work in the schools, I kind of went way beyond just being a speech language pathologist, but my speech language pathology background always really grounded the work that I was doing in these different areas. I retired from my school district about 6 years ago, and I went to work for Lesson Picks. So an amazing company. If people aren't familiar with it, definitely go check it out at lessonpicks.com to create visual supports and augmentative communication materials and learning resources and therapy materials and much, much more. And that's really how Tali and I got to know each other, was through Lesson Picks and the awesome things that she was posting, particularly during the pandemic, about what she was doing with Lesson Picks in order to support her teletherapy sessions. And so that's really how we got connected. And then kind of during the same time is how I got connected with Becca, because we shared a client that we both worked with. Becca worked with her in person and I worked with her virtually doing primarily literacy work. And so kind of, full circle there. But yes, Chris and I worked together, presented together for many, many years. And then he reached out to me and our other co-authors, Karen Janowski and Mike Murata, about writing a book called Inclusive Learning 365. And I'm so grateful that he gave us that opportunity, because it has been such an exciting journey in developing and creating a professional learning resource for speech language pathologists, special educators, OTs, teachers, classroom teachers, right? It's not just special ed oriented. And that's actually our goal with it being Inclusive Learning 365, is we want to reach the people that are working with students every single day in all sorts of spaces. And we published that in 2021. And now we are currently working on, it was one big, thick, really large book. And now we are working on 4 smaller, more directed books as second edition. So the first 2 that'll be focused on reading and then executive function will be out in June of this year. And then following that, we will have ones on writing and professional learning. So yeah. And then we, along the way, somehow or other, we also developed a set of card decks, a set of cards, a card deck, tips to activate inclusive learning, quick wins, strategy cards. So it's been really fun being not just a speech language pathologist, but being an author and doing lots of other things with that.
So how was like your first, like the first time, because for both of you is a little bit different, but getting into publishing? So like, because you're with a traditional publisher,
We're with
right?
ISTE.
Everything has
Yep.
been with the traditional publisher.
Mhm.
So what was that process was it they approached you, or, okay, because sometimes, people approach the publishing company.
I'll let Chris tell that story, because he's the one that pulled me in on this book. So
Yeah. So back in the day, the very first presentation I ever did, Sally and I were at the time it was called the Florida Educational Technology Conference, but now it's called FETC. It's Future Educational Technology Conference, Future Educators Technology Conference. Doesn't matter. The very first presentation we were doing, and the night before the presentation, Sally and I were going through it, and we were like, this is the most boring presentation we've ever, like, who would want to come to this? It's on policies and procedures around assistive technology. And basically we were thinking it was stuff that would help us help people create assistive technology teams when practice is put in place, but it was so dry. And so this was in Florida. And so Sally and I woke up in the morning going, Sally, we got to change it. We got to change it. And we got together real quick. We put Disney quotes everywhere. And as people we turned it into a little game, whereas like if you saw a quote, just yell it out, this is from Cars or this is from Aladdin or whatever, because we were in Florida or Orlando. Well, at the end of the session, this person comes up to us and he says, hey, you guys really have a fun spirit about you, and I really like what you're doing. I also really like, at the time we were making these strategy a day calendars. So these were made in PowerPoint, and we just made them through our school district, and it was just one strategy a day. But he said, I kind of like that calendar idea. Have you guys ever thought about writing a book? And Sally and I looked at each other and said, oh yeah, absolutely. This is our first presentation. We had never thought about like that. Anyone want us to write a book? But yes, absolutely. So that started our journey. That was a publisher from ISTE, the International Society for Technology Education, who I've been working with just as long, like 20 some years. Publishing stuff. So that became the practical and fun guide. They really embraced the idea that we're going to build it and make it fun and make it something that wasn't too textbooky to read. Who wants to read a book on assistive technology policies and practices? It's like, well, wait, we have like monsters and robots and monkeys and pirates and stories woven in, and it made it something that was something unique. So long story short is, yes, they came to us, and then we've had this great working relationship ever since.
That's wonderful.
And then for our book, the Inclusive Learning 365, again, Chris was approached about was really a takeoff of these calendars that he had been heading up for his school district, and he very generously reached out to myself and the two other authors and said, "Hey, let's do this together." And we were like, "Yep, we're all in." So we didn't have to go through that route, I guess, that a lot of other folks have done, of self-publishing or finding somebody, sending out drafts to publishing companies and trying to find it. We got invited, which was lovely.
Parallel story, by the way, since we're on a podcast here, is at that time I had just started a podcast called the AT Tipscast, and it was one of the first podcasts about assistive technology. And I was more just doing it because I was liking listening to podcasts and something didn't exist out there. So I started just, having fun making something like that, a sort of a side project, not thinking it would turn into anything. But when the book came about, it was one of the first that we were the first. The Practical and Fun Guide was the first Facebook page ISTE ever had for a book. Can you imagine having a book without a Facebook page now, right? But then the podcast helps support here's all this free content that you can listen to know that we trust these people, so we're going to buy their book. And then, I got their book, and that one guy does a podcast too, and start listening, and they start complimenting each other, right? And I think that just is how it goes now. I think very few people are just authors. You're an author and you also work in social media, right? Or you have to do some sort of social media push, right? It's all sort of blended together. But back in the day, it wasn't really like that. That was sort of groundbreaking.
It's an interesting point, because I think people think when you're with a traditional publisher, they take over all the marketing. But really, when you have your own podcast, you're doing quite a bit of marketing independently. And can you talk about that? That's sort of where the roles are or where the balance is of who's taking care of how much of the marketing in that relationship?
I mean, I would say if we love our publisher, they're great to work with. They're fabulous people. We wouldn't certainly probably be having the book sales that we have without them. However, if we only relied on their marketing, we wouldn't be getting the information out to the people that we want to have it to. And so we really do, like, whether it's social media or a podcast or, however it is, reaching out to other people and marketing our work. We infuse it into, without being obnoxious about it, but we all do a lot of presentations for lots of different conferences in the education, special education, speech language pathology realm. And we can't but help in those sessions pull something from the books, because it came from our lived experiences as professionals. And so there's that kind of, it's very much a cyclical process of, like, we do something on social media, or we do a presentation, it references the book, people find out about us, they ask us to do another presentation. So it's it kind of feeds itself in that way. But again, ISTE is a large publisher with many, many authors to support and promote, and they do a great job of that, but we really do it to a targeted group, I would say.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I like the way how your book like weaves into so many different things that you do. And I think probably like just using your book is just a natural thing when you're, when you're presenting, because it just helps support it. My question was, how was it, just sort of collaborating, because you're not in the same physical location. Like, how was it writing a book together or working on projects together just remotely? Like, how did that work?
Well, we started during COVID. I mean, actually, we started just before COVID. Just before COVID, we started working on this, and then COVID hit. So it was really natural and actually quite wonderful to have these regular weekly ongoing Zoom meetings, because that was the way we were all connecting at that point. There wasn't any in-person professional collaboration. And so that it just was a very natural, and that's just how the majority of the work of the time that we work together that we continue to just do. We have we have a regular calendar of Zoom meetings. We meet pretty much every week throughout whatever process that we're doing. We occasionally are together in person, but it's usually because we are together at a conference. We have taken those times that we've been together at a conference and added additional time onto it for in-person group work. But I mean, easily, like, what would you say, like at least 99%, 98, 99% of the work that we've done has been collaboratively on Zoom or using collaborative technology tools. And we do use a lot of different collaborative technology tools to work together on the book.
So I do a podcast. You mentioned earlier the podcast that you were on is called Talking with Tech. And one of the reasons we do that podcast, and I think it's one of the reasons you're doing this, is because it's your own professional learning, right? Like, yes, people listening right now, they're doing professional learning, but this is our professional learning. And everyone always says, like, put together a presentation or teach somebody something, you know it even better, right? So part of where you're doing that is your own professional learning. And I find, Beth, that our relationship with Mike and Karen helped me personally with my own professional learning. And I'll give you a very specific example. We were writing Inclusive Learning 365 ed tech strategies for every day of the year. And I emphasize the word strategies because we get together and we've all done separate presentations. And Beth and I, and Mike and I, we've done some, buddied up and done duos a couple times. But point is, we have this vocabulary word, strategies. What do we mean by that? When we're talking about technology, do we mean using Microsoft Word? Is that a strategy? Or is it, implementing text to speech? Okay, is that a strategy? So we had to define these terms together. And then that, for me, was, Beth, I don't want to speak for you, but I think for all of us, it was okay, this is what we mean by these words. And we're going to come up with rules to help us to in the same way a fictional author has to put guidelines on what they're writing so their world just doesn't squirrel off and break rules, this is how zombies are born. You can't, they're not born a bunch of different ways. They're born this way in this world, right? Same thing over in our nonfiction spaces. This is what a strategy is, and this is what a strategy is. And we got to have these guidelines and these rules so we don't break them. But our collaboration helped us figure out what those really were. And that just solidified things for me in my other work. Like now I use the way we define a strategy, I use that all the time.
No, I would agree. I would just say that I think the initial work that we did on this, and it was throughout, but it was really a lot of this was the initial work that we did on this. We made decisions. We decided early on to focus on strategies versus tools. Like, tools are definitely a part of the book, but one of our kind of tag phrases is, tools come and tools go, strategies persist, right? A good teaching and a good educational, instructional, therapeutic strategy is going to persist regardless of a tool that you may use and that you may have loved, and then it's no longer there. And so then you find another tool to fill in because you don't want to let go of that strategy, even though the tool may no longer be there. I think the other thing that I know for me, it really had an impact on my intentionality in my use of vocabulary, because we had to decide, we were, you typically think of those individuals that we are teaching things to, whether it's as a speech language pathologist or as a teacher or as an educator, those are students. But we decided we wanted to use the term learner because we felt like students made people think of your K-12 enrolled in school. And we really wanted the term learners to be more broad, and the word learn was like, it's not that you're student and study, right? It was less about studying and more about learning. And so we made a decision to use the term learners. And then we decided, all right, are we doing this for teachers? Are we doing this for speech language pathologists? Are we doing this for, assistive technology professionals? And we were like, no, it's educators. These are all educators. And it didn't matter whether you were a classroom teacher, whether you were an ESOL teacher, whether you were a speech language pathologist or an OT or a paraeducator, or for that matter, a parent, that we were all in terms of this book, the adults that were doing that work, we wanted to call them educators. So as we adopted this for the book, it really changed the vocabulary that I use in my everyday language in talking about in talking about education. So we worked together collaboratively to come up with these things, and then the impact really expanded from there because we wanted this to be inclusive.
I have another quick story to share that will, I think, tie all together. When I was writing the new Assistive Tech, Make Learning Awesome for All second edition, I had updated it, so it was like 50% of a new book, right? So what's old, but the first one was written before the pandemic. The second one was after the pandemic. This is before generative AI. I'm writing the book, or generative AI just came out when I was publishing it. Point is, I was done with the draft and I knew something was off. Like there's something with the order. I could not figure it out. So I'm on a walk with my wife, and I'm like, hon, I just cannot figure out. There's something off. She's just you're trying to make it perfect. Don't let perfect be the enemy of done. Get it through the door. So got it through the door, and the editor sent it off to the 3 peer reviews. 2 of the peer reviews were like, this is great, love it. The second one, oh, this is great. Third one was like, what is this? The order is all messed up. I wanted it in this order. And I'm so thankful for that third peer reviewer, because I was like, that's it. Yes, the order was messed up. It needed to go in this. The flow wasn't right. Yes. And then I went back and made those changes. And that, I didn't have anyone to collaborate with. I mean, I'm talking about my wife, right? But I'm writing it myself, and I'm working with a publisher and an editor. But with the 365 crew, there were 3 other people to give you feedback and give you insights and say, hey, is that what you really mean here? Or is that what we stand for? Or shouldn't we say it this way? And I think the peer reviews were a lot faster, easier, because we had 3 other authors to help craft what we were trying to say.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you have other people looking at your work. I think that's like the benefit of collaborating with other people. And then just one more thing. I also think that you take a lot of people, just because like doing assistive technology in schools also, I think a lot of people get really intimidated by assistive technology. And I think by using the term of like educator, because if you made it so specific for people who are assistive tech specialists, it's like, I just think that's like a very select. And then some people might think, oh, well, I can't do it because I'm not like a specialist, or I'm not a consultant. And so I think once you make it more relatable to people, they kind of feel a little bit more comfortable using it. And I agree about the tools, because the tools do come and go.
I'll give you a quick story about empowering everybody to become to view themselves as an educator. So I was an assistant principal, and some of the staff that I supervised were all of our non-instructional staff, all of our supporting services, so building services and cafeteria workers and all of that. And I would meet with them, and what I would tell them in the beginning, like we would start our school year, I'd be like, what do you do? What's your job? And they'd be like, well, I clean, I'm the buildings, I'm the cafeteria worker. And I'm like, well, what do you do? And they're like, well, I make meals and I help the kids get their lunches. And I'm like, and what does that do for kids? And they're like, well, so they won't be hungry. I'm like, and what does that do for kids? And they're like, well, so if they're not hungry, they can do their work and they can learn. I'm like, bingo, you are an educator because you make it possible for the children in this building to learn. And that was like, and same thing, like the building services, like you make the room clean and safe so that the children have a space that is clean and safe and they're available for learning. And so it's really letting people see, like, you do have the power to, you're not just here making lunches and mopping floors. You are impacting the education of the individuals that are in this building. And so having that feeling of, we are all responsible for the learning that happens. And that was really important to me. And that's kind of like, when we talk about inclusive learning 365, it's not just the inclusivity of like, every child should be able to have access in a classroom. It's that everybody in all these different little ways is impacting what happens educationally for these beings that we are supporting in schools and in learning spaces.
It really builds a sense of community as opposed to linear roles where people are in their different silos. Everything becomes like an interconnected web, like a net that can influence each other.
Well, and I'll say this all ties back to being an author and marketing with your book, because like if your title is the new assistive tech, make learning awesome for all, Becca, just like you said, well, I'm a math teacher. Why would I pick up that book? Well, but it says make learning awesome for all.
Right,
And we had to make
exactly.
all those decisions, just like in a movie, every shot, someone had to decide where to put the camera and what's going to be in the background. And like all that is designed. So is the title and the camera, the way that's laid out and the fonts and all of that helps people get it. Because if they don't pick up the book to read it in the first place, then what you're saying, it never becomes an interconnected web.
That's right.
Because they're not actually reading it.
So I have a question then in terms of like working with a team of four, because that's quite a team, right? To author a book with four people. Did you have, the four of you, the full vision at the very beginning, and then you sort of divide and conquer, or did things evolve? Like, how was that process? And I'm also curious, what you pictured at the beginning, how close was it to what the product you had at the end?
I think it's pretty close, Beth. I mean, at least in my vision. I mean, one of the reasons I reached out was because our school district stopped making those calendars. And I was like, all right, so we have free license. Let's make a calendar. And ISTE said, well, we don't know how to make calendars, but we know how to make books. And by the way, maybe you don't want a calendar because you'd have to update it every year. And that's a lot of work. And you have to get it on a certain time scale. It's not like a dog of the day and it doesn't really matter,
Right.
Or word of the day. So it was like, we make books. It's like, okay, let's do it. And maybe there'd be some longevity there. It wouldn't just be 1 year and done. But as far as the vision of different categories and useful things that are 1 page equals 1 strategy. And by the end of a year, you've read an entire book if you read 1 page a day. I think that was pretty close, Beth. I'd say 80%.
Definitely. That was the overarching vision, was that, this was going to have 365 strategies in it. If everybody, it's kind of the idea of like bite-sized, just-in-time professional learning, right? That we stressed all the way throughout, like this didn't need to be read in a specific order. We organized it so that it was organized categorically so people could find things that they wanted, but you didn't have to read it in a specific order or anything like that. I think other things definitely, like we didn't know how we were going to organize each page, or we didn't have that idea, and that evolved, and it evolved pretty quickly. But it definitely, we had to come to some decisions as a group. And so you mentioned, Tali, about like, how did it work together with a group of 4 people? I would say number one, we all knew and respected each other and had worked with each other in some way or other previous. Although we hadn't all 4 necessarily all worked together on a project. However, we also had to kind of agree at the beginning to be vulnerable, to leave your egos at the door. I had worked on a large collaborative writing project prior to this. So I was a curriculum writer for my school district, where there was a team of like 25 of us collaborating on writing an elementary curriculum. And I kind of applied some of those rules to this of like, this is not personal. You've got to be able to, everybody needs to be able to edit each other's work. That's how you get a cohesive voice. That's how you get, a better product that doesn't feel disjointed. Like, oh, I can tell Chris wrote this, or I can tell Karen or Beth wrote this. And so it was really important for us. Like we had to agree that, we weren't going to agree on everything, that we were going to use consensus. We often say, this is not the hill I'm going to die on, or this is the hill that I'm going to die on, right? Like, and be able to be like, okay, right, if it's that important to you, we'll go with it. Or, oh, okay, I get it. No, or convince me differently. Like, this is what I'm thinking right now, but I am open to being convinced differently. Change my mind. And often we do, right? Like my mind has been changed. And so I think it was mutual respect. It was setting some ground rules and understanding. And it was knowing that this wasn't a piece like some perhaps chapters that you might write in a book where every chapter has a distinct voice because it has a different author. to it, and then it's edited and around a common topic. This was not intended to be that way. We wanted a cohesive voice all the way through. Now, if somebody knows us really well, they might know a particular strategy that one person or other spearheaded because
it has Dungeons and Dragons in it.
Because it has Dungeons and Dragons. Right, exactly. So there might be some things where, but we've all come to own all of those things to the point now where when I look at this book and I look at a strategy, so we divided it up. So we all, 365. So we all were writing something like 80 strategies and then came together and then group edited. But if I look at this, there are many of these that I have absolutely no idea who was the primary author of that strategy, who was the one that did the first draft of it, because it evolved so much. So I can look at things, some things I know, but some things I'm like, I have absolutely no idea who wrote Making Connections, Strategy 270, Making Connections with Digital Concept Maps. I have no idea who started that one. Chris, you?
Well, I think one of the rules we adopted really early on was to use the pronoun. It's not my strategy; it's our strategy. I'm not writing it for me. I'm writing it for us, and then I'll edit it, and then it just becomes ours.
How many did you have? How many strategies did you have at that first meeting?
Oh, not enough. Like we started off, I have to say, I think our first meeting, we started off with tools. Like our very first meeting was like, all right, we're going to do one on, Google Keep, and or Google Keep for this purpose. And we're going to do, and that had to evolve. So like when I looked at because we sent ISTE like a sample couple of chapters, and they are dramatically different from what we actually ended up doing because they were tool based.
Amazing.
Right, but that makes so much sense. Like it's why the strategies are timeless.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like it's just, and it's something you could use for forever because if you do a tool or even if like the name of something could change, but and I like also how you went back to what is a strategy. Like kind of because I think sometimes like in presentations and we assume that everyone thinks of that word the same way. But everyone thinks of words a little bit differently. And it's like if you kind of go back and you think about it, that came up with modeling, I feel like recently in an article. Like what is, right? We're talking about AAC and modeling. And I'm like, oh, wait, you know what? That's good to just sort of go back. What is your definition of a strategy? So I really like that. I think it's really interesting. Yeah.
People might be enjoying this, experiencing this right now, going, okay, so what's your definition of strategy? Because you haven't said it yet. So we'll say, here's what it is. It starts with a verb, and that verb can't be using or implementing. It's got to be something that is, it's not because you just say using Microsoft Word, and you're just putting the tool first, right? So it's got that. Basically, that's it. It's got to be a verb, an action that somebody takes to benefit their learning. Fair, Beth?
Yeah, fair. Like I'm just glancing through, and it's not that they're completely not like now. You can have general verbs like writing or but it's like linking literature reviews to books with QR codes as opposed to using QR codes. Right? It's linking. What are you doing with the QR code? Oh, we're using it to link literature reviews to the books that using a QR code so kids can easily find a literature review about a book, or writing creative narratives using 3D animation. So it's not about using 3D animation. It's about, we're specifically using 3D animation to help us come up with ideas and write creative writing about, as that is the impetus for it. So kind of that way. But but we had to decide that. Like we didn't know that when we started, that's how we were going to do this, right? It was much more like using Google Keep to organize references.
Right. No, I understand. But I think that's how a lot of projects start. You start with one idea, but then it evolves over time. And that's the great thing about collaborating with other people, is that it could evolve together.
Totally.
We all learned a lot from each other. I feel like each one of us are better people and better educators, professionals, because of the work that we did collaboratively. Like, even if we'd each written this book separately on our own, we wouldn't be as good at what we do now if we hadn't done it together.
Mhm.
You might not have gotten past the first meeting. Like, you might not have moved from tools to strategies, which is at the heart of the project.
And I can absolutely guarantee you it wouldn't be as much fun. Sitting by
So much
yourself
more
writing
fun.
365 strategies versus laughing about, no, I want 4 pages of a book. Our pages, it's 1 page per strategy, but for the Dungeons and Dragons, I want 4 pages, making, goofy jokes like that.
That was a real discussion with our editor last week.
We were joking. We knew it had to pare it down, but we had so much about role playing and esports. We were like, to make learning fun and joyful, that we had to pare it down.
So the next iteration, so the project that's coming out in the early, like late spring, early summer, can you talk about how it's differing? Like, you talked about that it's splitting up part of this book. Is it thematically, does it change in any way, or structurally?
Yes and no. So there's no way we could have 300 right. Like, we still kind of want to stick with that general-ish number of a strategy, of strategies chunked up so that it's digestible learning for folks, but we went with weeks. So now it's like inclusive reading, 52 strategies, 1 for every week of the year, right? That's not the exact title, but close enough.
Yeah.
And so we were like, all right, how can we organize this around a calendar? We really liked the idea of organizing this around a calendar. And so we were like, all right, let's do a strategy for each book, for 1 per week. So if you put it all together and you read all 4 books at the exact same time, you're getting 4 strategies a week, but it's not necessarily the way we expect people to do that. The layout, the organization of each strategy is pretty much identical. We didn't change that at all. We did refine. We definitely realized we learned from things that we did in the first book that maybe weren't as clear or as effective as we thought when we were in the moment. And so it impacted, like, our editors in the first book let us get away with some really unwieldy titles of each section. And our editors for this go round were like, nope, this needs to be shorter. So
Okay, fair.
Better at that, I would say.
Well, and part of that, again, that people don't think about is, Beth, if you hold up that book, this is a big, thick book. And if you put it on your shelf, it's larger than the other books that ISTE has, both thickness-wise, but then, the
difference
layout of the
between
page.
Traditional professional learning and ours is significant,
So in these new 52 books, the books will be smaller, thickness, but also how high and how wide they are. So the pages are smaller, which means you have less content per page, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's layout stuff you don't necessarily think about when you first sit down at your typewriter to start typing, or to generate your work, right? But now that those constraints, and again, those constraints I think are really helpful. Just having some sort of guidelines to follow and keep yourself from just rolling the bowling ball anywhere. Let them bounce off these bumpers is a lot easier. You don't think of that at first. You think you want the whole world. Let me just write everything I know about role-playing games. No, you got to keep it short and tight. Brevity is your friend, And then the other thing that I would say about these 52 is that because it's sort of our version of a second edition, we looked through the original and said, okay, well, what do we want to keep? What are some new things that we want to add? And we had to make some tough choices there. Like, okay, there's this expression in authorship of, especially in fictional worlds, where you have to kill your darlings. I got this story and I love this. I fall in love with this paragraph. Yeah, but does it really add anything to the story? Sorry, you got to cut it. It might be the most beautiful, flowery paragraph you ever, but if it doesn't drive the story forward or plot forward, cut it. Same idea here. It's like, well, are these two similar? Can we mesh them together? Or, we don't have anything about this. We got to add that in. How do we totally leave that out of executive functioning? We need that. So we had to do a lot of slicing and dicing to make sure the 52 are as tight as possible and as meaningful as possible and most useful for people as possible.
And I would say too, ISTE is a publisher that it has a focus on educational technology. It's the International Society for Technology and Education. And so as the world has evolved since we published this in 2021 to 2026 and beyond, what's the thing that has overtaken everybody's, minds in so many things, right? It's artificial intelligence, right?
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
They were like, right? So they were like, this is, and we were on board with that. We were totally on board with that because it was already overtaking. It was the tools that we were using also, right? And we were seeing the power of this. And they were like, all right, we want, I don't know what it was, if it was like 75% of this needs to be new and 25% of it, and it needs to incorporate AI. And we were like, all right, how do we make this doable? Like, we didn't want to rewrite everything. We did rewrite every single strategy that we put in there, even ones that we reused. But how do we not throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, as far as like keeping the things that were really good and that we wanted people to still pay attention to, but update it with AI tools or with a way that you couldn't do things before, right? Like, the way of doing things is different that we couldn't do previously. And so that's definitely something new that is coming in and changing it. We maybe had a handful of references to AI in the past book, but it was really just at the very start of how it was being utilized in education. So I think that's a big piece of it.
And keeping true to who we were. Like, do you remember ISTE came to us and was like, so we want to brand it like maybe there's 52 AI tools, or do we have the title, but down in the bottom there'll be a splash that says including AI or things like that, right? And it was like, but wait, who are we? The tools come second. AI is a tool. So what are we trying to accomplish? And the tool will help us accomplish that, which again, I think is going to have much longer legs than any book you get that's like, here's how you use generative AI. Well, that's going to change in a month. So, but the strategies persist.
Right. And also different schools have different access to different type of AI.
Totally.
Like, and then also some people feel like they may not even want to use AI. So I think it's like having, like all different ways. That's why I like your approach to that, because it's so different within so many different places with different people. And it's evolving. Honestly, I mean, it's everywhere.
And honestly, that's even true with the technology piece. Like every single strategy that we have in the book, in the old book, and in the future coming books, incorporates technology. However, we also acknowledge that there's certain completely low tech things that people are that are still valid and useful and worthwhile, and that work for people and that people don't want to let go of. Like, we just were editing a strategy around calendar use, and we had to acknowledge that like there are people that pry my paper calendar out of my cold dead hands. I'm not, that is still really important to me. It's not personally, I don't use a paper calendar, but there are people, right? Like, and there are teachers, right? Like my daughter is a high school teacher, and she's like, no, I have to have my paper calendar. And so we acknowledge that in there, that there's not only one way to do this. And I think that's really important too. Part of being inclusive is that there cannot be a single way to do things, and different variations on a strategy work for different people. And if we want to truly be inclusive, we can't just be like, no paper ever again, because that doesn't work.
Exactly. No, I 100% agree.
How do you guys split your various roles? Because you're both wearing the author hat and of course I think SLP hat, and Beth, you're in lesson picks hat. So how do you work-life balance those things, or work balance those things?
I mean, personally for me, I'm really lucky that I can be somewhat flexible in my schedule. Like, as long as I'm putting in my 8 hours or whatever a day, if I am doing a couple of those hours a day later in the day, allowing me to do, for example, we're doing this right in the middle of the day right now. But also, I would say 90% of our meetings are at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so it's, prior to most of our start to our actual 9 to 5 kind of job. A lot of the work that we're doing complements our primary jobs.
Mhm.
And so there's a little bit of research that happens because I'm using this for my real job, but now I can write about this for the book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're also, for me, I'm very fortunate that I have the support network that I have. I have a wife that understands that I need to run off and do something because she's just as busy. And my kids, when they were younger, it was nap times doing the work. And now they're older. And so I have a little bit more, I'm doing less with them face to face because they're off doing their own thing, right? They need dad a little less. So I think, and then the other answer to that is poorly, like meaning it's hard to find the time and make it all work and do it, but it's important work and it's meaningful and it's purposeful and you get these great stories that come out of it. I remember once upon a time with the new assistive tech, Mike and I were at a conference and we were supporting other people doing this presentation by running the mic around. We weren't even we just volunteered. They're like, oh, these are our friends up there doing it. Do you guys need to run the mic around? So Mike and I ran around the mics. And at the end of the session, this person came up to Mike and I and she was like, hey, can I talk to you? It's like, me? And Mike's like, go ahead. So I go off with her and she goes, I just want to tell you, she pulls out my book. She had carried it with her to this conference. She said, this book changed my life. I have a job in the new assistive tech. I wrote a job description of what an assistive technology, someone who works in inclusive design would be, what their job title might look like. She's like, I took this and I gave it to my administration and I said, I want this job. And they said, okay, let's create it. And now I have this job that I wouldn't have had otherwise if you had not written that book. And so when you get wins like that, it totally makes like, all right, I got to stay up till midnight. I got to rush. All right, I got to get this thing out because, it makes a difference in the world. And so I think that's certainly it's not the money, right, Beth? I mean, where there's no inclusive 365 yacht that we're
right.
on.
You guys millionaires from the books that you've published yet?
Right.
In some parallel universe, somewhere out there.
But when a parent comes to you and talks about how they're implementing an AAC device now that they never did before because they listened to your podcast or because they read your story or something, like it means something and it means the world,
Yeah.
Exactly. When it's important, you make the time.
Absolutely.
And you have a book on executive functioning. So you guys are experts in
100%. And I've learned things from the things that we've written, like that somebody else was like, oh, this is, and I'm like, oh, that's genius. I'm going to start implementing that. And then I would have to say for like the executive function book in particular, so many of the strategies are pulled from our real lives and the way that it's for students, but it's also how we as adults use these things. And I would say, like the writing book is going to be that there's things in the context of writing. And then certainly the last book, which we haven't really started writing yet, but the professional learning book, which we did write a whole section on it in the already published book. It came from our real life worlds, and some of it, it just intersected, right? So, the book is us, we are the book, and it bleeds across all different facets of our worlds.
It's going to change many, many lives, like many professionals and many learners, many educators and many learners. It's amazing work.
We hope so. Isn't that the goal for all of us? Like, Becca, with your children's books, it's you want children to love them and you want the adults reading them to learn strategies from them. And same with you, Tali, with your book and with your games and all of the work that you've done. It may be fulfilling you creatively as well, but it's really like that long-term impact of when it gets into the hands of the people that are going to use it and read them, that it's going to make change. Karen, our co-author Karen always talks about she'd like to work herself out of a job. She wants to like make so many changes that her role is no longer needed. But she also acknowledges, and she'll say this with like sort of mock frustration, but maybe not, like, I'm never going to work myself out of a job. Right?
Yeah.
But that's what we want. We want the impact on we all went into this career. I have to tell you, people have been all my whole career. I've said, "Oh, you're such a good person. You work with children with disabilities." I'm like, no, I'm really not. I don't like I'm not a good person because I work with children with disabilities. I enjoy my work with children with disabilities. But I want things to happen, right? I want things to, it's not about me and that work. It's about maybe something happening because of the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, our jobs are still, we still have a lot of teaching to do for other people, that's the thing. I think and like I said, it's just a lot of people are really intimidated. And I think your book kind of helps make it much more relatable and breaks it down.
Thanks. We hope.
Yeah.
Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to share?
I would say there's one thing that Beth, we haven't talked about the website at all. That was one quick to mention, but difficult to decide is, well, we can offload things that don't fit in the book onto a website, but we still want to make that tight. And the idea that, okay, well, our book, there's the tools embedded in pages of the book. How do I get to them quickly, or extra related resources? Here's a podcast that complements the point that we're making in this page. How do we get people to that quickly? So in the current book, the Inclusive Learning 365 book, every page has a QR code that takes you to a website that you can then and a URL. In fact, all of the URLs have little shortened. They're either short enough that you can type them in, or they have a shortened URL on them. But in the future books, we're thinking just guide people to the website. Go to the website and see all the complementary resources there.
Right.
Oh,
so
perfect.
you're not
That's a good
trying to
idea.
figure out like the link to a particular article. It's on the website. Like we cite an article in the book, but you don't have to go search for that yourself. I mean, you might, but if you just go to the website, it's going to be there.
Almost like a digital version of an appendix in a historical book.
Right. We'll put that in the description.
That's exactly. Yeah. And some of it is, we also made some decisions. So the first go round of the book, you might not know exactly what you're looking at when you're on like each page of the book. Like it's like strategy 1, resource 1, 2, 3, 4, but we were kind of like, oh, well, let's not reveal too much. We want people to buy the book. With this next iteration of it, we're being a little bit more transparent. So like, it's still going to be like strategy 1, but then it's going to have like the title of the web page, or the title of the article that it's going to link to, or the title of the podcast. We want people to, if they stumble across it, we also want them to find these things to be useful. We're a little less worried about, oh, buy the book and then you can get all these extra resources. Like, use these extra resources and then maybe you'll buy the book, or buy the book and then maybe you go use all these extra resources. We just want the information out there. We want to see education change. We want to see things evolve. Education in 2026 is still way too much like education in 1956, way too much, right? There's too many similarities and we want that to change.
Totally.
Amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us. It was a great joy. And really, really excited to see your new books come out in the spring.
Well, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us. We appreciate it. And Becca, my grandson, loves your latest category.
Oh, that was so sweet. When you said that, I was like, oh my God.
And I gave it away. I did an adapted books session, a hands-on adapting book session. And I had a few copies of that. Participants got to pick. I had a stack of books and people got to pick what book they wanted to adapt, and those were all gone. So the copies of that I had bought and to use in the adapting book. So your work will hopefully have some relevance to it.
Thank you.
This is SLP by Day,
Author by Night,
with Tali Kellerstein and
Becca Eisenberg,
bringing the SLP writing community
together.